Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into my latest video. Today, I am going to be speaking about my wide receiver tiers. Just like I did for my running back video, I got about 50 or so players I'm going to be speaking about today. Not all of them, because I don't want to spend too much time. Just kind of show you guys how I view these group of wide receivers entering the season. And again, these aren't based off rankings. These are tiers. This is how I view these specific players. You'll see that how these players are grouped. Some of their ADPs, you got some receivers going up in that first or second round, but I don't really view them. I really might not like their situation, or they might be having a lower ADP, but I very like their situation, so I'm willing to take a chance on them. Let's just go ahead and dive right into the video. I'm gonna start with my locked-in wide receiver ones. These are players that I believe that you can draft as your wide receiver one. You can count on them every week, and then barring an injury to themselves or barring an injury to their quarterback, they should be ending their season as a wide receiver one. That's Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown, and Cooper Kupp. And then, like I mentioned too, in my previous videos, I went and collected the stats as far as their PPR points per game according to Pro Football Reference. Jamar Chase since 2020 has the sixth highest average. Justin Jefferson has the fourth highest average. Tyreek Hill has the third highest average. Stephon Diggs has the fifth highest average. AJ Brown has the 10th highest average, and Cooper Kupp has the second highest average. So those guys are locked in. You guys already know this. I don't have to spend too much time explaining why these guys are great wide receivers. And moving into the next tier of wide receivers. Now, these are wide receivers that I can see finishing as wide receiver ones. These are guys where maybe if you do take a running back first in the first round, I still think that you can draft them in your wide receiver one spot, but they still have to prove that these are guys like I believe that have to prove them, not necessarily prove themselves. They're just like in situations where maybe they have a questionable quarterback situation, or they are in an offense that is got a lot of competition for targets. But we got Terry McLaurin. Biggest issue is obviously we need to see who Sam Howell's going to be, but he did have an initial good look in his first preseason action. Obviously, we got CD Lamb, who has the 16th highest average points per game since 2020. It's just with the addition of Brandon Cooks, I wonder how the ball is going to be spread around between Lamb, Cooks, and Michael Gallup. And then we got Garrett Wilson, who I'm very high on entering this season. We already heard about Aaron Rodgers talking about how he looks like Devontae Adams. DJ Moore, we saw what he did in that preseason game, and you know with him being the number one target in that Bears offense, he's going to see a lot of targets, and volume is king in fantasy. I'm excited about the return of Calvin Ridley. He does have the seventh highest points per game since 2020. Jalen Waddle, year three guy, and Devontae Smith, both year three guys that I'm very high on. And Jalen Waddle does have the 17th most points per game since 2020. Then you got another year three guy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who should see a bunch of targets, who should be a PPR machine, but I think he can finish as a wide receiver one. He has the 19th most points per game. T. Higgins, obviously Jamar Chase is there, so he does kind of dominate the targets, but anything happens to Chase, all of a sudden T. Higgins has that, gives you a wide receiver one throughout the year. And then DK Metcalf, I've always been a big fan of him. I think he's going to see a lot more one-on-one opportunities with the addition of Jackson Smith-Njigba playing that slot role in Seattle. And then Deebo Samuel, I think he's going to have a bounce back year. He even talked about it this offseason, how he wants to, shake off his performance from last year and get back to the player he was, and he does have the 11th most points per game. I'm going to kind of talk about it here later with another wide receiver in that offense. I don't necessarily love what's going on with the Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold situation, but I think with Kyle Shanahan, he's going to be able to manufacture those touches for Deebo. So I still trust Deebo in my lineups this year. Moving into the next tier of wide receivers, these are reliable veterans I view as wide receiver twos, but these are guys that can give you wide receiver 1 weeks throughout the season. And then maybe if everything goes right, I can also see them finishing as a wide receiver one by the end of the year. That's Amari Cooper, who has the 21st most points per game since 2020. Keenan Allen, who has the 9th most points per game since 2020. DeAndre Hopkins, the 8th most points per game. Tyler Lockett, the 15th most points per game. And then Mike Williams there because he got a great quarterback with Justin Herbert. So, like I mentioned, these guys might not be able to give you like a lot of ceiling games throughout the year, but I think they're guys that you can put in that wide receiver 2 spot and you can count on them week in and week out. Now, moving into this next section, I was kind of hinting at this with earlier in the video. These are going to be wide receiver guys. I'm sorry. These are going to be players that I believe can be wide receiver ones and twos this season. But I do have major questions at quarterback, and obviously there was a name that was missing at the first tier. That probably, as a player, he deserves to be in that tier. But I just do not like the Raiders quarterback situation for Davante Adams. Jimmy Garoppolo, we have yet to see him play. Like not yet, but it's been pretty apparent that it's like what he had that one season when the 49ers went to the Super Bowl that I believe he did play in all 16 games that year. But yeah, that's my whole point. Jimmy's always missing time, and their backup situation in Las Vegas is Brian Hoyer and the rookie Aiden O'Connell. So I just don't really trust that situation for Davante this year. He does have the most points per game average since 2020. So it's like normally I would be totally okay drafting Davante Adams in the first round, but I don't love it. And maybe if other people don't like it too, and he does drop a round or two, I'll be comfortable drafting him. I just have those questions. And the same thing, like I mentioned about Deebo Samuel with the Brandon Ayuk, I think he could have a really huge year. I just would like to see him with Trey Lance because Ayuk's can be more of a downfield threat, and Trey Lance has a stronger arm than a Brock Purdy. And then I know this whole like Steve Young thing that Kyle Shanahan's saying about Sam Darnold, but I still wouldn't trust that. Then you got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, right? Mike Evans has the fourth most points per game since 2020. Godwin has the 12th most points per game. Both of them are phenomenal wide receivers, but are we going to really trust that Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask is going to constantly feed them the ball and make them a guy that you can count on week in and week out? And then moving on, Michael Pittman Jr. Obviously, he's going to be the leading guy that in Indianapolis that will see the most targets. I do still believe Anthony Richardson is going to start, and I do think that Anthony Richardson, as I've talked before, it could end up being a very great fantasy quarterback. I just wonder if the first season underneath Anthony Richardson, if it's going to be more of a run-heavy offense utilizing his rushing ability. And I wonder how many times the Colts are going to put the ball in the air throughout the year. And then Anthony does have to improve as a quarterback, and he's going to have up and down. So I just wonder how reliable Michael Pittman would be throughout the season. Same thing with Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. We got to see if the Russell Wilson project underneath Sean Payton is going to work out. But they're still good wide receivers. I would be willing to take a chance on, just maybe not at their ADP. Same thing with Drake London and Desmond Ridder, Christian Watson and Jordan Love. Those are guys that can be great fantasy wide receivers for you, but we have to see if their quarterback can prove it and that you can count on their quarterback to get them the ball consistently, where you can put them in your lineup and not have to think about it. And then Marquise Brown is the guy I think should be able to get the most targets in the Arizona offense. But the thing is, we don't know how long Kyler Murray's going to be out, and if we're going to be able to count on that Arizona passing attack without Kyler in the lineup. Moving into these next three wide receivers in this tier, these are wide receivers I view as PPR machines. I believe I mentioned it in other previous wide receiver videos. When I draft my wide receivers, I try to get like a very great wide receiver 1, a very reliable wide receiver 2, and then I do play in leagues where we do have 3 wide receiver lineups. So either as my wide receiver 3 or possible as a flex option. That third receiver I try to find guys that are PPR machines, guys that might not give you a high ceiling, but they're going to get fed the ball. And these are 3 wide receivers I think that slide into that spot. Deontay Johnson for the Steelers. He has the 22nd most points per game since 2020. Christian Kirk for the Jaguars. We saw that he was able to be that type of PPR machine last season. And then with Brandon Cooks coming to Dallas, I think that he's going to be a guy that maybe not getting his ceiling performances that we've seen over the last few years or over the course of his career, but I think he's going to get peppered with targets in that Cowboys offense, and he does have the 24th most point per game average since 2020. The next tier of wide receivers, now these are young wide receivers that I believe offer a high ceiling. So these are guys where maybe you don't want to rely on them in your starting lineup in the first 4 to 6 weeks. But if they can prove and they can take advantage of their opportunity and role in their offense, and it does depend on some of these wide receivers' quarterback situation and if their quarterback's going to be proven this year. But these are all guys I would be willing to take a chance on, get on my bench, and I think they offer a high ceiling where by the halfway to the later part of the year when you get closer to the playoffs, these are guys that you can slide in your lineup and count on. That's Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Traylon Burks, Elijah Moore, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, and Nico Collins. Now, moving into this last tier of guys I'm going to speak about today. These are bench wide receivers that I believe that can be startable throughout the season. So a lot of these names, these are guys that are either older veterans, so you don't really want to count on them. We have to see if they're going to be able to keep up their level of play that we have seen in the past. These are guys that are maybe they have injury concerns for me, so that's why I didn't place them in the higher tiers that I've already talked about. And then they do have maybe questionable situations at the quarterback and how their offense is going to look with that quarterback in the passing attack. But they're guys I would like to have on my bench because I could see them being startable because either injuries happen to other players, the quarterback that they're tied with ends up being a reliable passer to them, or it's just that these are guys that I think could eventually give you a higher ceiling if everything goes right and they can stay healthy. That's Kadarius Toney. Speaking of injuries, Gabe Davis, I just think he's a guy that would be a nice spot starter when the matchups are right as well. Juju Smith-Schuster with the Patriots. We know the Patriots loved utilizing their slot receivers in the past, and they gave him a decent contract, so I think he's going to get peppered with targets. He's a guy that could maybe slide up on that PPR machine, but I just want to see what the Mac Jones offense looks underneath Bill O'Brien and see if you can count on him before you can move him into that PPR machine tier. Michael Thomas, obviously this guy can be a wide receiver one. This guy can kind of be a PPR machine at least minimum, but we got to see him being healthy. Allen Lazard's tied to Aaron Rodgers. You know Aaron Rodgers is going to throw him the ball, and I think he's a guy that where you can start him throughout the year based on what the matchup is for the Jets offense. Odell Beckham Jr., he just has to prove that he's healthy, and if he's healthy, yeah, I can definitely see him being moving into that wide receiver, reliable veteran wide receiver 2 territory. Adam Thielen, he has the 23rd most points per game since 2020. It seems like him and Bryce Young have a nice connection there in Carolina. And again, though, we have to see that connection first, but if it is there at the beginning of the season, all of a sudden he slides in that like wide receiver 2 or 3. I would view him as a reliable veteran. Rashad Bateman, year 3 wide receiver. I did that video about a month and a half ago. Go back and watch it. But as long as he can stay healthy, he does have an opportunity to give you a high ceiling this season. I mean, Lamar Jackson literally called him last week his wide receiver 1, so that's something to keep an eye on. Alec Pierce, he's going to be a nice downfield threat option for Anthony Richardson. But like I was talking about with Michael Pittman, we got to see how this passing attack is going to look underneath Anthony Richardson throughout the season. But I mean, if there's any indication from this yesterday's preseason game, he's going to be a nice, very downfield threat. I think there's going to be some big performances from throughout the season. I just wonder how consistent he's going to be. But if the matchup's right, I think he can be a guy that slides in. Rondell Moore is just another year 3 wide receiver I got my eyes on. Obviously, he has his injury history, and then we have questions at quarterback. And then Van Jefferson, I think he could end up being like kind of sliding into like a PPR machine type of role. But we just have to see how this Rams offense will look this year. But I do think that behind Cooper Kupp, he's going to have the second most targets in their offense. So volume is king in fantasy football. So if he can get in that like 7 to 10 targets a game range, then all of a sudden you're talking about a guy that you can slide in throughout the season. But yeah, those are my tiers of wide receivers. If there are any wide receivers I didn't talk about, you want to hear my thoughts on, get in the comment section. I'll get right back to you guys. As always, like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, follow me on all my platforms. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever we want to call it these days. But yeah, that's my wide receiver tier video. Next video you guys will be my tight end tier video. I do plan on doing that on Tuesday night, so that's when you'll see me next. I hope you guys have a great week. I'll talk to you later.